Hello and welcome to the Economic Times Consumer Freedom Series. I am Rini Khanna, and together with the country's largest media conglomerate, the Times Group, I'm happy to host a series of conversations for consumer freedom with the intent of not limiting consumer choices, but also protecting the customer in a largely digital era of merchandise. In November 2020, the Times Group, through ET Edge, an Economic Times initiative, curated a thought leadership platform to push the narrative around consumer choice, highlighting the need for progressive regulations to be based on science rather than blanket bans. The multi-stakeholder discussion saw participation from renowned speakers from various walks of life, sharing their thoughts on the subject. This platform attempts to impress upon decision makers the need to stop, to ponder, and to take a long-term view on the social and economic impacts of legislation that looks to just ban and not regulate different products in the free market. The Economic Times Consumer Freedom Series features interactions with thought leaders from across the globe on issues limited to freedom of choice and their choices, consumer freedom, including but not limited to that freedom of choice, a democratic approach to lawmaking, prohibitions, bridging the gap between buyers and sellers, and offering safer alternatives as a choice, an innovation-driven economy, and of course, much, much more. Today's conversation features an interaction with thought leaders from the domain of digital and social media and looks closely at a scientific approach to tobacco harm reduction. To help me do just that, we have our subject experts, Mr. Jaspreet Bindra and Dr. Rohan Savio Sequeira. Jaspreet Bindra is a leading expert on digital transformation, blockchain, the future of work, and AI. He's the chief tech whisperer, Findability Sciences, and the founder of Tech Whisperer UK. Earlier, he was the Chief Digital Officer at Mahindra Group and a Regional Director at Microsoft. Jaspreet has authored the best-selling book, The Tech Whisperer, on digital transformation and the technologies that enable it, as well as the book, The Immune Organization, Future-Proofing Organizations from COVID-like Disruptions. Dr. Sequeira is an honorary consultant physician to the governor of Maharashtra and a senior consultant physician. He has cross-institutional and practice setup experience in the international medical and paramedical domains for more than 2 decades. He's a cardiometabolic physician, specialist in non-invasive cardiology, diabetes, endocrinology, and obesity management, and works at several leading hospitals in Mumbai, including the Jaslok, St. Elizabeth, SL Raheja, and Holy Family. Thank you to both of you and welcome to this episode. If I could begin with you, Jaspreet, organizations today are using different technology tools to communicate better with customers and, of course, offer better customer service. Will the future see more and more technology interactions, or will human interactions still be around?
That's a great question, Rini, and it's great to be here along with you as well as Dr. Sequeira. Organizations and individuals have always had technologies to help communicate with each other better. In fact, as they say, man is a social animal, and communication between each other has been of paramount importance for all of us. And it does not necessarily separate us from the other species, but we kind of tend to do it far more than many of the others. And we've always had that. In fact, the internet 35 years back really became popular primarily because it helped us communicate better with email and then chat and the evolutions going forward. However, what happened was that while technology tools-based communication was accelerating and increasing, the COVID pandemic absolutely turbocharged it. And as I wrote in my second book, COVID, it's something called the COVID paradox. It slowed down the world, but it accelerated change. And this is one of the things that absolutely accelerated. In fact, we came to a situation where all or almost all interaction was technology based, as you know, as face to face and human interaction took a back seat because of the fear of the virus. Now that hopefully COVID is receding, the question which therefore gets asked is that, look, have we kind of reached a situation where technology-based communication, therefore tools coming for it, are going to just supplant human-based interaction? And as you would have seen in the last few months, we've been doing revenge holidays, revenge travel, revenge everything, including revenge face-to-face communication. And so as we go further, while I do think that COVID-like disruptions will be actually more frequent than they ever were. However, technology-based communication tools are not going to supplant human interaction. What is going to happen, however, is I believe that while it will be a hybrid situation, human interactions will continue, but technology-based interactions will probably become far more immersive and far more personal, and will almost seem like human interactions, and with the whole metaverse and all these other such environments coming in. So they will definitely continue. In fact, communication will become even more, but both the human part and the technology part will have their place in it.
Very, very interesting to note, Jaspreet. I mean, I love the words that you've used, COVID paradox, and of course, the other terms that you talk about when you are emphasizing that human intervention is going to remain. Moving to Dr. Sequeira, harm reduction refers to the policies, the programs, and the practices that aim to minimize negative social impacts associated with addictions. Could you perhaps share with us some of the leading challenges that consumers struggling with tobacco addiction face today in the context of determining whether to quit cold turkey or to find a safer alternative? Dr. Sequeira?
Right. So thank you, Rini, for that question. Harm reduction has always been the cornerstone of every kind of an addictive behavior, whether it is cigarette smoking or whether it's nicotine addiction, or for that matter of fact, any form of addiction. Harm reduction has always been, because people have always had a tendency to continue whatever they are doing because it's very difficult to break a habit. Now, with regards to nicotine, because of the addictive nature and because of the psychosomatic features that are associated with smoking tobacco or consuming nicotine in any form, this forms a very strong chemical-based reaction in people's brains, which give them a very tough time in giving up something which is giving them satisfaction at a chemical and a molecular level in their brain. Now, you're trying to break something which is embedded into a software structure. Now, harm reduction should be, in fact, the policies for harm reduction should understand these chemical, physiological, and psychological changes and produce some kind of a policy which allows an individual to adapt into that policy and gradually taper him off. See, addiction at any point is not a good thing. So it's always better people stop cold turkey. But as we know, they have one stressful event, they have a second stressful event, they're back again smoking a cigarette because they find relief in that. It allows them to cope with that situation. Policies as existing today, right now, I think there's a lot of gaps in those policies because they do not understand, or rather they have not factored in the chemical, the psychological, and the physiological changes that go through. So it would be very important for any policy decision-making committee or association to understand this, have a proper discussion, bring those things on board, and see what is the best possible solution for an individual. Now, here is where the Western governments usually score a little bit more because they have more of an open-ended debate rather than some group of advisors who just say, yes, we need to ban it and the whole thing is banned. If you see the harm reduction alternatives that have been present in the market till date, whether it is chewing gums, whether it is smoking patches, or whether it is any of the other forms, lozenges and everything, it's dismally only 7% of the total people who go on to these harm reduced alternatives, only 7% actually are able to quit smoking. And of those who go cold turkey, 1.5% is the global average for those who quit smoking cold turkey. So obviously these policies don't work. And there is something which is required, which gives the person a nicotine, but at the same time also gives them the feel and the psychological. Because it's not only about smoking or tobacco or nicotine, it's also the environment it creates, the smoke, the hand to mouth experience. All of these actually have a deep psychological ingrained pathology. These need to be addressed. That's what I feel on this particular point.
Yeah, talking about addictions, Jaspreet, a few months, I mean, technology is as addictive as tobacco is, I guess. A few months ago, we had many Indians who switched on to Signal and Telegram with an aim to get off WhatsApp, and many even signed out of Twitter and logged on to Cool. How can technology businesses prevent such instances of an exodus? And in such a scenario, how should social media businesses balance customers' privacy along with the regulations? Jaspreet?
Rini, when Dr. Sequeira was talking, I did not hear the word tobacco, or whenever he used to say tobacco, I heard networks. Okay, because actually, as the doctor would testify, many times social media gives the same chemical physiological reactions in our brain and in our body as do other known addictive substances like tobacco, certain drugs, etc. It's the same dopamine kicks, it's the same serotonin, it's the same things, and so it's it's as hardwired as tobacco is, except that it is not seen with that much disfavor that tobacco or other addictive
Products.
substances are. Yeah. I would, in fact, he mentioned a figure of 7% of people who quit smoking. I would suspect that that figure would be almost zero for people who want to quit social networking. And we saw that, as you said, when people tried to migrate out of, WhatsApp and
One platform onto another, yes.
so they tried to go to more platforms which claimed more privacy and more security, like Signal, for example, or to some extent Koo, for example, or other such social networks. But very soon, in fact, I was one of them. Not that I quit one to go to the other, but I also went to the other. In fact, there were even more secure networks like Mastodon and
Yes.
some private networks which on quote-unquote blockchain-based architectures. The thing is that the one thing which social networks have, which smokers do not, okay, is this thing called network effects. Okay, which
Network?
effects. Okay, network effects. Okay, it's actually something called, like there's Moore's law, there's something called Metcalfe's law, which says that a network increases proportional to the square of the users. So it's an exponential increase. And what happens is that you go on WhatsApp or remain on WhatsApp or on Facebook for that matter, because all your friends are. And for you to go to Koo and or Signal and remain there, all your friends also need to do so at the same time, which does not happen. So you go there and you find the Sahara Desert. Okay, and after some time, your good intentions vanish and you kind of come back. So I think what these players need to do is they need to, I mean, some of these guys who have achieved those network effects, like the big networks that we mentioned, actually, fortunately or unfortunately, have no fear of people actually ever going away. Okay, unless the network itself collapses or there's heavy regulation to stop those networks from existing, like some of it is being seen in China. And finally, coming to the last bit of your question about how do they ensure privacy, and there's no easy answer to that. All these networks for the near future are going to battle out between disclosure-related regulation that the government will bring in and the individual right of privacy. And depending on the governments in that country, it will swing one way or the other, depending on the social situation and the governments. But there's no golden bullet answer to actually achieving both and satisfying both the parties.
Right, got it. Before I go on to ask my next question, I think it's good that I should inform our audience that in September 2019, the Indian government announced a complete ban on e-cigarettes under the guise of preventing a potential health risk to India's youth. This ruling was, of course, passed as an ordinance without debate, without any sort of deliberation in Parliament, and mostly ignored, both the evidence regarding health risks and the lessons that India's multiple previous disastrous experiences taught us with the bans that were in place. In this context, Dr. Sequeira, if I could ask you, do you think safer alternatives are generally plagued by inadequate and perhaps ineffective policies? And what role can positive regulations play in enabling customers to benefit from safer alternatives?
Right. So basically, what happened in the entire ban of e-cigarettes was there was multiple factors that went into it. Number one was the biggest thing what we found out, because we as a group of so we have an international group of doctors called CAPRA, which is based in Australia, and this group basically works for harm reduced alternatives, not only in smoking but in various other products as well. Now, what exactly happened was that there were a lot of factors which went into this entire ban. Number one was lack of evidence or lack of understanding of the entire topic, because this was something new. People did not know what it was, or rather they ignored many of the pros and the cons. But the biggest thing at the end of the day was we, at least it's my personal opinion, is the economics. In the last 2 years, just taxation on tobacco-based products was about 65 to 70,000 crores. Okay, and secondly, the government itself owns 30% of ITC, which is one of the largest tobacco manufacturers in the country. So it's kind of a conflict of interest over here. But at the same time, I feel that what should be done is, if we look, positively in the future, is try to find a way out of this situation and be on the safer side. Because obviously, when you smoke a cigarette, you're releasing more than 4,000 plus chemicals, of them around 30% are cancerous. Now, when you look at e-cigarettes, if you look at the basic analysis of an e-cigarette vapor is basically the liquid is just glycerine. It's just glycerine, flavor, and nicotine, which is the active. Now, nicotine by as itself is not as harmful as, we'll say, caffeine. We consume caffeine every day. It's a stimulant. Yes, it's got its pros and cons. Anything in excess, even caffeine in excess, will cause you tremors, shivers, and all those things. But what is important is if you're able to provide a safer alternative for an individual, where you get a 90 to 95% of harm reduction, which is documented by clinical evidence and by research which is done in the West, that by itself gives you a benchmark saying that definitely, even if I look at something which is 50% harm reduced, it's always better than something which is 100% harm reduced. Yes, the goal is always to stop smoking, but not everybody can do that. So the policies should be looked at from a very global point of view. Most of Europe, the US, most of the developed countries where the liability is also very higher, have regulated cigarettes. They have regulated the e-cigarettes. They formed the committee advised them that, you don't need to ban it, you can regulate it. I'll give you a prime example is where I just was discussing was about Australia and New Zealand. What these two countries did was, they actually formed a committee. The committee was comprised of medical consultants across both private sector, government sector, everybody. And they came out with a policy that, okay, we are not going to ban e-cigarettes, but we will regulate it in a very strict manner. What we will do is it will be allowed to be prescribed by medical consultants to people who really want a way out but are having difficulty with the existing methods of harm reduction. So this gave a lot of opportunity to people who wanted to get out of it. And they had a medical prescription. In fact, in Australia, New Zealand, it's illegal. Now, in India, we already have the infrastructure. We have pharmacy laws. You just can't go to a pharmacy and buy a sleeping pill, right? You need a prescription. We have the infrastructure. Why not piggyback this particular thing onto that particular infrastructure, come out with a policy so you actually offer people a harm reduced alternatives. I've got patients who have undergone multiple bypasses. I've got young people who are coming to me with cardiac disease, diabetes, all the other range of lifestyle diseases, who are constantly smoking. We have this young population in high stress who are finding cigarettes and alcohols as a way out of getting out of the stress. This would be the ideal target. We can't just say that young people are going to go into and start smoking e-cigarettes or not. They are going to do it anyways because it's already available in the grey market. You go to any mall, you go to any place, it's available whether you like it or not. So regularly put a policy in place and bring it into the mainstream so that at least you have a control over it. And I think any government should really consider that in their next policy decision making.
Wonderful. I think these are very practical solutions. Jaspreet, social media and mobile devices. I mean, you know that it could lead to psychological and physical issues. You've got eye strain, you've got difficulty focusing on important tasks, which seems to be the bane of our generation today. You've got it contributing to more serious health issues, sometimes even leading to depression. And the overuse of technology and the effect that it has, the detrimental effect that it has on children today and teenagers. Considering all of this, do you see technology as a threat? And would you suggest to the government to have laws to regulate that also?
Well, the short answer is yes. The long answer, always whenever a new technology comes in, it passes through a dark phase and then it kind of stabilizes. Actually, the internet also happened that way. When video players and just recording video started, there was this widespread outcry that they will be misused, pornography will spread, etc., etc. When computers came in, some of us are old enough to remember, there was a huge hue and cry about how they will lead to a huge number of jobs lost. Most times, not all, but most times, what really happened was that these technologies actually, at the end of it, net proved far more beneficial than detrimental to humankind. There are some technologies, however, which early on was discovered had such destructive power that they needed to be reined in right in the very beginning. I specifically refer to the nuclear technology, for example. While nuclear power has huge side benefits, it also was recognized that it has the potential to destroy mankind. And so, the world kind of got together. It was a more agreeable world then, but they got together and, kind of put certain regulation in place, created the IEA, AE, and, fortunately, at least till now, so things seem to be changing. After its first and only use, there has not been a nuclear warfare since then. And so it's been successful. Now,
but we've had minor disasters. I mean, Chernobyl.
That's right.
You can't ignore. Yeah.
Those are. I mean, you have planes and sometimes planes crash. Then you have ships and sometimes ships.
Sure.
The percentage is very low. But I think there are now some technologies, and two of them which I can think of are social media and artificial intelligence, and they both, in some sense, feed upon one another, which were again brought in with the power to do good. But as it went further, people have started realizing that they have an enormous power to become addictive, to literally remove a lot of our human characteristics and abilities from us. And again, I'm fond of saying that as the screens are getting smarter, the human beings are getting dumber. Okay, and the key with these technologies are in social media specifically is that unlike any other, whether they were televisions or whether they were computers, here we have the power to take it with us, and it always remains with us. And so potentially it's addictive 24/7. And then with artificial intelligence, obviously it's the single technology which actually tries to replicate us. And so I think these two technologies specifically, the time has come to regulate, or to some extent. Obviously, the key will be to find the right balance. The European Union has been amongst the first to try and find that. And I think we're going to see more and more of it as we go forward.
Okay, we're really, crunching in on time now, but I'd like you to respond to some of the questions very quickly, if you could. Dr. Sequeira, India has 300 million tobacco users, and there's this government's goal to reduce tobacco usage by 30% by 2030. How do you think this is likely to happen? I mean, in the absence of widespread harm reduction awareness?
Very, very unlikely to happen. On the contrary, I think there is a lot of focus which needs to be done, especially in the rural areas, because that's where the consumption of unfiltered cigarettes is maximum. People using BDs, people using tobacco products like the Mishri and all the other kinds of tobacco-based products, a lot of oral cancers. What I think really needs to be done is a very good digital health initiative that the government can actually utilize existing bandwidth, incentivize it. Now, the way to incentivize, of course, they're looking at incentivizing the tobacco growers, but they're not looking at the end users. So basically, this policy will have to be done from the center in a very, very different way. Tobacco-related injuries and healthcare issues costs can be anywhere between 65 to 80,000 crores per annum on a drain on a government's budget with regards to healthcare. Now, this is a very, very difficult, exercise. Now, this has to be at the local level. There has to be a policy where they have to have every primary healthcare center to have regular talks to people. You go to any government hospital today, you will not see anything on harm reduction. There's not even a single board other than a no smoking sign. So that is something which really needs a very strong policy and a clear objective as to what they want to achieve in harm reduction. Just killing the messenger or just shooting, people here and there and putting down and banning something here and there is not the answer. You need to find it at, I believe my professor used to always say, don't clean cobwebs, kill the spider. So I think we really, really need to hit this at the grassroots level and then gradually bring it over to the metros. The awareness is already there in the metro. It's the real down to earth farmers or people in the tier 3, tier 4 cities who really need this initiative. So I think that's where the focus should be in the next 3 to 5 years. And if they come out with a policy, I think that should be very well implemented. They have the ability to implement. It's just that they need the decision to do that.
The will to put it in place. Jaspreet, any last thoughts as we close?
I
Two
think,
things that you want the government to do.
One is that we should not be looking at extremes. One extreme is a complete free for all, and the other extreme is you ban it so that it just doesn't exist. Like the way people are thinking of from a crypto viewpoint, for example. Okay, the right way is to kind of think of somewhere in the middle, and a bunch of countries are doing that. So it's not that you'll be doing it for the first time. You can go out and look at the best way to regulate industry. Number one. Number two, I think regulations and bans can only achieve so much. At a point of time, what is really needed is education, and awareness at a customer, consumer, children level. And so the same way that we started educating people about population control or about tobacco usage, etc., I think we need to start educating people about at a governmental level about the harmful addictions that sometimes technology can cause.
Right. I think we've come to the close of the session. Thank you, Jaspreet and Dr. Sequeira, for joining us today and completely being, forthright and candid in your responses. It was certainly an insightful session, and I'm sure our audiences would have enjoyed it as much as I did interacting with both of you. Before we close, we'd like to urge the government to rethink its stance on banning products and services and to take the consumer's freedom into consideration. We feel, of course, and we know that banning is the worst form of regulation and should ideally be avoided. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And of course, do join us again as we keep bringing to you interesting conversations on consumer freedoms. Thank you. Bye-bye.